of them, it's just a seepage in the yard and so forth. The fine for that is $500 a day if you're found guilty, every day that it malfunctions. And there's no limit to that. 5,000 is the maximum fine, 500 is the minimum. So, knowing that this high percentage takes place, the DEP, when Tom Ridge became governor, he said, lay off the private residences. Do anything you want to a commercial building, but lay off private residences. Only deal with malfunctions that have a complaint. So our sewage enforcement officers in the state of Pennsylvania kind of have these directions. And a sewage officer that works for us, if he sees a serious health hazard, that doesn't require a complaint. Other than that, we all deal just with complaints. Now, your office here has a form that we put together that you complete when you get the complaint.
Can they be anonymous?
Yes. We then, that's sent to us, emailed to us. We sign it to the sewage officer in the general area. It could be any one of the three, but we usually have people that basically work out here. In this case, it's Ray Calvert. We would sign it to him, and he would, we need to know enough information, not just that somebody lives at 537 Walnut Street has a malfunction. We need to know what their name is, we need to know their phone number, the township needs to give us something. Because the sewage enforcement officer calls and makes an appointment to be there. I mean, he has every right, he has more right, strangely enough, to walk on unannounced on the property if he has a reason, if he has some reason to suspect, than many officers have. Various officers in the Commonwealth. We don't exercise that situation. We do, if somebody tells our sewage officer to get off the property, we get off the property. It then becomes a malfunction. It's a little like the breathalyzer situation. When someone says, I won't take it, the officer obviously says, okay, you're guilty. And it's the way we do it. Our process then makes him prove he's not guilty. And so consequently, once you've given us that authorization to make that first visit, now it becomes a DEP, state of Pennsylvania, registered malfunction. And then we follow through with it on that basis.
Now, if there is a complaint, the township is responsible for paying the co-op if the malfunction is non-found.
Right. I've always tried to advise all the membership, the supervisors, that, okay, this guy here doesn't like this guy, they're neighbors. And this guy got him on one, so now he's gonna complain about his malfunction.
Mhm.
And we follow through the process and we go out and we find out that he doesn't have a malfunction. Then we charge you for what we had to pay the sewage officer.
Unless it's anonymous. Well, unless it's
No,
anonymous.
we would charge you.
You charge the township.
Yeah,
Right.
we would charge the
How
township
much
if it's-
is that?
If it's clean.
Is it $150 now?
155 now.
155.
That's what we actually, it costs to do a dye test and so forth. And I'm sorry, I think I got confused with the dye test and it's $130.
Okay.
$130. So it's a case, obviously, if there is a malfunction, then the person has to come in and get a repair permit. We get a fee for that, and that fee includes that call that he's already made.
Yeah.
So therefore.
I know in past years, we've had anonymous complaints come in, and we've had to send them up and.
Well, we've always suggested that to have a member of the road crew, or one of your, anybody that's not being paid necessarily more, or what the sewage officer is, to go take a look at it. To go out and look at his piece of property.
Before you make the complaint.
He looks all around, he can't find any site of anything, then maybe you don't have us go
Right,
through it.
gotcha.
I have a question. Go ahead, Sue. Don't you have a right to know your accuser?
No, not if you have a violation.
Well, you would know if you have a violation if you didn't follow up on an anonymous complaint. Well, my question is this, what she's saying, if there's a fee, so you're saying, if somebody files a complaint, they can file it anonymously. Is that you guys' rule, or is that the township?
That has to be the township's rule.
Okay,
That has to
then
be the township's rule.
I would propose, most certainly, I don't know why you asked that, Doug, but no anonymous complaint should be valid. We went through this
I disagree with you, especially if it,
with the code
and most
enforcement.
times I agree with you, but I disagree with you on this case because it's a matter of public safety or some, it could be somebody's health.
If it's a true issue, you wouldn't have a problem standing up and signing your name to it.
Well,
We
I'm
went through
just
this with
saying,
the code
you
enforcement.
can't,
No, that isn't
No.
true. That isn't true.
If it's valid
No,
and not
no.
a,
Many times people will report it, and they have a serious malfunction. They just don't want to get into a one-on-one with their neighbor, or it might be 2 neighbors down or 4 neighbors down. So it isn't just a case that, like I stated here, that he doesn't like him, and it's a case where they're just fighting as between.
okay, but that's what I'm talking about. Use the case, the example you made. If these 2 neighbors don't like each other and they do it, so it's a frivolous, anonymous
But see,
complaint.
how do you know that? How do they know that?
I'm giving you an example, okay? That's exactly right, you don't know because it's anonymous. So in that case, you go out, you charge the fee, and the township and the taxpayers all pay it because it's a frivolous complaint. If you're not allowed to have anonymous complaints, which you should not, then they wouldn't have that burden. Then whoever files that complaint, if it's found to be invalid or frivolous, they should have to pay your fee. That's not right to pass that on to the
Some
taxpayers.
townships do that.
Well, so the easy way to resolve that is no anonymous complaints.
Some townships even make them put up the $130.
Right, that's what I'm saying. If you wanna,
A liner fee, that sounds good to me.
right,
I have a question. When did they start charging for repair? I thought a landowner could repair a system at any point in time.
Not since 1962.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought when I read through that you could do repairs as long as you weren't, like a broken pipe or something that could be fixed without.
You can repair a septic system at your house without a permit if you're just dealing with the pipes from the house to the tank and from the tank to the absorption field.
Right, that's
You
what I
can't
said.
touch it, you can't touch the absorption field, and you can't touch the tank.
Right. Yeah, that's what I said. You don't have to, there are exceptions to
That's
that.
right, and that's the only one.
second question I have for you, could you talk a little bit about the 10-acre exemption? How that applies, when it applies, how does the residual system, how does that apply, if there is a residual system?
In 1990, evidently enough landowners pressured their legislators individually, because in 1989, or 1980, in 1987, DEP changed the rules. And before 1987, if you had 10 acres or more, you did not need a permit. In 1987, they changed that, and they left a window of 2 years. If you fell within that and you did build till January 10th of 1989, you still didn't need the permit. But if you waited till January 11th of 1989, now you needed a permit. So they gave a 2-year window to clarify, people that already had maybe made plans even, to start but hadn't yet, and so forth. With the 10-acre exemption came along, they said if a direct relative of the person who owned the ground on January 10th of 1987, that's when they changed the law, that person or a direct relative could put in any system they wanted to under a what was referred to as a 10-acre exemption. We don't do any testing for it. We issue the application for the 10-acre exemption. We make an inspection to verify that they're 200 feet away from the various things the law says they have to be away from, and then we issue the confirmation, and that's the last we deal with. Sometime, and can't tell you when, DEP came along and said, well, we're gonna make an exception to the one person. Because when they made the law in 1990, they said only one 10-acre exemption per parcel. Now, many of your farmlands are, the deed shows 3 or 4 parcels. So really, there could be 3 or 4 if they could get 10 acres in that separate parcel. But they came along and they said, well, we're gonna make it, and this is typical of the DEP, not by going to the legislators and saying, let's change the law or anything. They said, if the person who earned the 10-acre exemption, the guy that actually owned the ground in 1987, cut off 10 acres to his grandson, that's a direct relative, he then could have one to use of his own on the residual parcel. So that meant in those cases he could get 2. And then along came, we had a situation up in Blaine Township. You probably, Adrian Wilhelm, you probably have heard of that. When Adrian died, his wife said, I don't want the farm anymore, I want to cut this up into 10-acre lots. So we couldn't find a place to perk in 2 of the lots. But she said, one daughter, it saved that lot for her, which was a direct relative, and we could use a 10-acre exemption in the planning module. But we still had the other one. And of course, based on everything we knew, that meant she had to eliminate that and make it a 20-acre lot, and therefore she could have that 10-acre exemption. Well, we sort of turned her down, and I don't know if you know Adrian's wife or not, but she pretty persistent. She evidently went to the DEP and explained her little plight. And I got a call from the DEP and said, well, she can have the second 10-acre exemption. I said, well, no, but it isn't for her. And they said, oh, that's all right. The court's gonna hold, if someone else can have 2 10-acre exemptions on a parcel, the court's gonna let anybody have 2 10-acre exemptions on a parcel if they have the ground to do it. So all of a sudden, now we can have 2 on every piece of ground. The 10-acre exemption law is so loose and it's ridiculous the way they put it together. If that's a 20-acre parcel of the table there and you want to cut it in half and that's going to be 10 acres, to get a 10-acre exemption, you have to stay 10 or 200 feet away from that property line you put across there. Yet, as soon as the person that built this house lives in this house one day, and this is DEP rule, one day, then they could turn around and subdivide off and come within the normal distance of a system, which is 10 feet. Now, how ridiculous is that? So, we are very loose in the Washington County Sewage Council. I'm very admit to this, to where this person puts this lot when he got a 10-acre exemption. He might have come out and put a flag in the ground right here, and he's 200 feet away from everything, and the sewage officer certifies that. It's his certification, it's at stake. And so he gets his 10-acre exemption. But then when he comes to build the house, maybe that's right where he wanted to put the house, and so he wants to put it down here. We could care less, as long as he stays 10 feet away. Because this ridiculous rule of theirs is once they live in the house one day, they can turn around and subdivide within 10 feet of this 10-acre exemption system. So, some townships don't allow it. In order to not have it in your township, you literally have to have an ordinance that says you have to have a permit regardless of lot size. That would literally have to be in your ordinance. So that's entirely up to the supervisors whether they allow a 10-acre exemption or they don't. I think it's pretty hard in a rural area like Donegal to logically say, we're not gonna have a 10-acre exemption when you have all kinds of systems in your township that you don't even know about that are malfunctioning and have problems. And obviously with 10 acres exempt, with a 10-acre situation, you're not apt to be disturbing anybody but your own family. And it's a serious situation. Ray Calvert was out on a malfunction inspection at one house because of a complaint. And he looked over at the neighbor's house, and the neighbor had one of these swing sets, just a cheap Walmart swing set almost, you know. And guess what? That swing set was located right over a sewage malfunction. And there was a child swinging on the swing when he was making his inspection in the neighbors. Literally with his feet going right through the malfunction. And he went to the house, and it's a tenant occupied house. And he said to the lady, do you realize that your child is out there walking and playing in sewage? And she said, well, what I'm gonna do, what can I do? I don't own the house. Well, you could find another house to live in, he said. Because he said, I'm gonna declare it a health hazard and it's gonna have to be fixed. So your landlord's gonna have to spend somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000 to solve that little problem. So you're probably gonna get evicted, thinking that you probably complained. So the malfunction situation is serious. You have them in Donegal Township. They're all across the Washington County. We try our best to handle them in a way, and some of you guys in the back there kind of said, why do you do this to one person, why do you do this to another? We try to help people. There are ways to get aid, to get fixed systems. We try to work with some of those people. We have given some people more time to fix it than others. We have discriminated only on the basis of where's the money coming from, how are they gonna get the money to do it. The weather itself is, right now we're to position, if we have a malfunction, chances of it getting fixed are gonna be next summer, next spring, to repair the system. And somebody says, well, gee, you're gonna have to put this up for another winter, and we say, how many winters have you already put up? Well, it's been malfunctioning for 25 years. Well, okay, what's one more winter versus 25 years? So we're faced with that kind of a situation all the time, and we try to use common sense. It's not always the legal way to do it.
Okay, we have campgrounds in that area. I mean, we pretty much, the ones that are here are all tied into the public. If somebody had to, you know, they're renting out to the gas well guys and stuff. They were gonna put one on their farm, say, can they put in a holding tank and then just have it pumped out, or do they have to get an approved system?
They have to get a
Does-
permit. They have
I'm asking if you guys have a,
Yeah, they have to, this DEP rules, they can do up to 8.
okay,
And they can have one holding tank for 8,
and you get a permit for that?
and you have to get a holding tank permit to do that, yes.
What size does a tank have to be?
It's gonna depend on how many trailers.
Oh, I thought you said 8, and I
Well,
figured you had a tanks.
8's max for that type of an operation.
Okay,
Other than that, it gets into a trailer park situation, which you get
Situation, then
into
you
a lot
gotta have
more
a-
regs, a lot more regs.
okay, I was just
It's
curious.
200 gallons per trailer. So if you had 6 trailers,
I have a question there. What's different about that than every state park in the state? Who has way more of the campsites than 8, and they all have dump tank, holding tank.
well, they've gotten a.
They have dump stations.
They've gotten a dump station permit from the DEP to do that.
So so you could have more than 8, you have to get a permit for a dump station.
No, you'd have to have trailer, you'd have to be classified by the state of Pennsylvania as a trailer park in order to do that, which they are, the state parks.
Is a trailer park different than a campground then? I mean, you couldn't, so there's no.
Well, campground is, trailer park and campground are basically the same.
Well, that was a question.
Yeah.
No, I think what he was asking was not a trailer park, but a state, like a national park,
Yeah,
state park.
state.
Not a trailer park, like a,
Yeah, like
But they get, they
every
get,
state park that you go to, Ryerson,
they
wherever.
they get a DEP permit for a dump station.
So that's not available to a citizen then?
No.
Tom, on these planning modules that come in with these subdivisions, the planning commission has to sign off on it? and then the Board of Supervisors has to sign off.
Right,
Then it goes back to you.
to go to the DEP.
You send it to the DEP to get the sewage permit,
Right,
not the township. You do that,
right.
okay?
And that's a deal that I made with the DEP. So everybody in our membership, and we voted to do that way, so that it doesn't get lost. So, what, it's my responsibility when it goes to the DEP to make sure every paper that was there originally when you got it is there. And I have the ability to duplicate it if you did forget one or lost one of them. So that's why it's kind of set up that
Okay.
way. But, see, you don't approve it,
Right,
you recommend it.
right.
And you sign off on it when, at your planning commission meeting. Then it goes to the commissioners, or the
Yeah.
board of supervisors.
Mhm.
And if they approved it, they go along with your approval, and they actually, or your recommendation, and they actually approve it, then they sign off on it. And their motion should read, we're approving this subject to, now, the problem here is there's two type of planning modules. One of them is one that there was testing and going to the DEP. The other ones were all the line shifts and changes where we used 10-acre exemptions and things where we didn't test. You're gonna have to know the difference of those. Because whenever it's not going to the DEP, the supervisors can then say, we approve this planning, this subdivision, based on, we've got everything we're satisfied with. If it's going to the DEP, the motion should read, we approve it subject to DEP approval. And then the supervisor should hold the Mylar. Get the chairman of the planning, of the supervisors to sign off on it, because generally all those have the chairman and the secretary. The secretary is usually more available than the chairman. So that when we get the letter comes through with the DEP approval, you'll get it, we get a copy of it, and the property owner gets a copy of it. And as soon as you get that, then you could call, then the secretary of the township would sign off on it and seal it, and call the property owner and say, come get this, because they have to
But the
get.
secretary doesn't sign and put the township seal on it until she gets the sewage permit in the
Well,
office.
As long as you kept it to yourself and didn't do it. I was just thinking, if you get the chairman to sign it,
Right,
then you don't have to have another meeting to do it.
right.
You already approved it subject to DEP approval.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Once she gets the permit in the office, though, she can sign it, seal it, and give it back to the property owner.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and you only have so many days to get that, they have only so many days to get that recorded, so you don't wanna hold it up once you've approved it.
Right.
Or they'll have to bring it back to you and get you to initial it all over again.
And that permit should be part of the entire folder for the subdivision? It should be included in that?
Which permit you mean that?
Of the, when the sewage permit comes in, because you, at least used to be, we always kept copies of
Oh,
the
yeah.
subdivisions.
See, once
That should be
once you
part of
get
that
it,
file.
once it goes back to the DEP, or once, if it's not going to the DEP and you've approved it, you can, you can go ahead and approve it. We just, we're not issuing a permit there, so there's no problem, but it's going to the
Okay.
DEP. When it comes back from the DEP, then we'll know, because we get a copy of it.
Right.
At that point, if the property owner has got the design of his system and the SEO's approved the design, then we issue the permit automatically.
Okay, how do you know if he follows the design you proposed for it?
Well, that's one of the problems that Donegal has, as well as half my memberships. If you don't have a good, solid occupancy permit, there's no way of knowing. DEP says that you need to have a final inspection of your system. If you don't have one, and we cite you for it, it's a $500 fine. But we don't know when they built that house. And since, some people even got sewage permits, and then their mortgage fell through, or they lost their job or something like that, now they can't build on it, and they never build it. And we have no way of knowing that. The only way The catch is that is if you have a solid, good occupancy permit that says you wanna see the copy of the permit, and you wanna see that we made our final 3 inspections. We have 3 inspections. We have a start of construction, permission to cover, and a final inspection. DEP doesn't require those 2. The sewage council does. Being a member, that means you do too. But we have no way to enforce that unless you have, as a township, a good, solid occupancy permit. Because we don't know when they're built. Every now and then, the sewage officer going by doing another job and says, gee, I never did a final inspection on that, and I see the house is there, it's done. And we'll sometimes notify that property owner if he's pretty well satisfied, he knows for sure that he didn't and would hold up in court, then we'll go after him for a final inspection. They don't get the other 2 though, which is a shame, because the permission to cover, actually, they make the system work before it's covered. They literally have to, if they don't have water there, they have to have water, they have to fill the dosing tank. If they don't have electricity, they have to have a generator. They literally make the system work. And we were justified in doing that. The sewage officer did a cover inspection, and it didn't work. It didn't come out into the system. And if you ever see a sand mound and you wonder what those 2 things that are sticking up the sides like are for, one of them, I mean, it literally, when they try that and they run that system, so much water will come out into those 2 pipes. And that determines if the pressure is right. You don't have to put a pressure gauge on it. They can tell by how much water comes out of there. If not enough comes out, that means it's not getting through the system. If too much comes out, it means it can destroy the sand or anything that's under. So he failed the system, and when he said, the sewage officer said to the contractor, and he was upset. He was ready to go with this. He said, call me whenever you find out what's wrong. And here, the night before, they were finished, ready for their inspection. They had worked up to, if they were closing at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whatever it was, they had run the pipe so far. Well, they didn't want mice or anything to get in that pipe, so they stuck a half of a t-shirt in. And sure enough, the next day they came along and there was this t-shirt. Now, believe me, that when that contractor went from being so angry at our sewage officer he wanted to shoot him, to he'd like to send him up in a hotel someplace for a week, because he didn't have to dig all that up once the house was all done and everything else, and then people move in, and all of a sudden their system backs up in their basement. And so we've really tried to, if any of you people develop ground and you're involved with us with sewage, it's a pain in the ass, pardon my English, what you have to go through. It's time consuming and it's expensive. But we have really tried to narrow it down as inexpensive as we can and as efficiently as we can. We don't have anything to gain for it to go any further or to take longer or anything else.
Have they decided whether the sand mounds truly work or not?
As long as they had those 3 inspections, and as long as they take care of their septic tank, there isn't a septic system in the world, if you allow the solids to build up and get into the system, it'll last. As long as that's taken care of, and as long as they had those 3 inspections, it'll last their lifetime. The pump might go bad, and the motor that runs the pump and so forth, or electrical circuit will go bad. But the system, sand mound will work if those things are actually compliant. In fact, we've got a bad name for 30 years at least, because we didn't have those inspections, and they didn't insist on them. When they get a design of their system in your township, they're paying probably about now, we figured it was about $280 back about 10 years ago, so it's probably $400 or $500 more for their system, because we require more things than the DEP. Only for the reason, we don't gain from it, we're not selling the product, you know. Just to make it and they're coming out with more and more. You have peat moss systems, filters, you have cooker shells, down cooker shell programs that help the situation. If you qualify for a sand mound and it's gonna be in your front yard and you're gonna have a sand mound this high, it's pretty stupid looking. Well, you can put an EcoFlow system in and, you raise up about that much. At about the same cost. It's, they have come up with some variations of it. But the DEP is so slow in passing new ideas.
But on the sand mounds, if they do have a malfunction, is that sand now not considered hazardous waste?
Yes, it is.
And what's
If
that
you-
cost to
if-
get?
If you remove it. On your property, it's not. We have homes like in North Strabane Township, there's been extending sewer lines, and the people call us up and they say, what do I do with my sand mound and my septic tank? You're not gonna believe this, but the DEP rule is, what do you wanna do with it? But if you remove it, it has to go out into Ohio to the,
Contaminated waste site.
yeah. And all this information is available to anybody in this room. All they have to do is call us and ask, and if people would inquire before they get going, so many times we can save them a lot of time and money, by doing it right. But now, if you just don't care what's in the ground, and if you don't care how you do it, obviously, the rules and regs are in your way.
We recently, were made aware of granny flats. Can you explain that some?
Yeah, if you have a situation where you have a family that lives in a 3 or 4 bedroom, 4 or 5 bedroom house, it